Even the wisest cannot tell, for the mirror shows many things. Things that were, things that are, and some things that have not yet come to pass. Galadriel tells Frodo in Peter Jackson's film adaptation of The Fellowship of the Ring. Not even the wisest can predict what the mirror will reveal, she responded, her voice melodic yet solemn. It shows many visions, echoes of what once was, reflections of what currently unfolds, and glimpses of what may yet come to pass. The equivalent passage in Ian Chesterfield's novelization, itself adapted from Jackson's film. These two examples of the same moment offer a clear illustration of how film and prose approach storytelling, showcasing their different strengths and constraints. The film line is sparse and poetic, compressing the idea of the mirror into a rhythmic, almost incantatory structure, and allowing the performance, tone, and surrounding visual context to carry much of the meaning. In prose, however, the novelization expands and uses descriptive framing to set an emotional tone without relying on the reader to hear an actor's delivery. Both versions demonstrate that film and prose are not simply interchangeable containers. Each medium offers different pleasures. Film delivers immediacy and sensory immersion. Prose provides reflective depth and interpretive richness. To further explore these differences, this video will look at one part of the story in both the film and the novelization of The Fellowship of the Ring. First, we'll watch a short clip from the film. Then, we'll read the matching chapter from the novelization. Since films move quickly and can show a lot in just a few minutes, while novels often take pages to describe the same events, we'll break the novelization chapters into short passages. After each passage, we'll stop to talk about what works well in the novel, what might be stronger in the film, and how each version tells the story in its own way. We'll go back and forth like this until we've worked through the whole chapter. At the end, we'll wrap everything up by thinking about what each medium does best, where they might struggle, and how comparing them helps us understand the story in a new way. By the time we're finished, we'll have a much clearer idea of how storytelling changes when it moves from screen to page, and why that matters. Let's begin. Will you look into the mirror? What will I see? Even the wisest cannot tell, for the mirror shows many things. Things that were, things that are, and some things that have not yet come to pass. I know what it is you saw, for it is also in my mind. It is what will come to pass if you should fail. The fellowship is breaking. It has already begun. He will try to take the ring. You know of whom I speak. One by one, it will destroy them all. If you ask it of me, I will give you the One Ring. You offer it to me freely. I do not deny that my heart has greatly desired this. In place of a Dark Lord, you would have a queen. Not dark, but beautiful and terrible as the dawn. Treacherous as the sea. Stronger than the foundations of the earth. All shall love me and despair. I passed the test. I will diminish and go into the west and remain Galadriel. I cannot do this alone. You are a ring-bearer, Frodo. To bear a ring of power is to be alone. This task was appointed to you, and if you do not find a way, no one will. Then I know what I must do. It's just, I'm afraid to do it. Even the smallest person can change the course of the future. Next, we'll read the first passage from the chapter of the novelization, and then compare and analyze the differences. Later that night, with the fellowship succumbed to slumber, Gimli's resonant snores providing counterpoint to the continuing elvish melodies, a different kind of magic stirred within the forest. Bare feet moved across the dew-dampened grass, without disturbing a single blade. The Lady Galadriel, clad in a gown that seemed woven from moonlight itself, walked among the sleeping companions. Frodo's eyes flickered open suddenly, as if responding to an unheard call. Through the haze of interrupted sleep, he glimpsed Galadriel's tall figure passing by, her golden hair flowing nearly to her waist, gleaming even in the darkness. Their eyes met briefly, hers ancient and knowing, his widening with wonder, before she continued onward between the trees. Without conscious decision, Frodo found himself rising from his bedroll. Some invisible thread seemed to pull him after her retreating form. He stepped carefully around Sam's sleeping form, past Merry and Pippin curled close together, and descended the carved stairway that Galadriel had taken. The path led downward, through the luminous forest. Galadriel passed between two elegant statues crafted in her likeness, each holding vessels of gently flickering flame. Frodo followed, his bare hobbit feet making no sound on the soft earth as they entered a secluded garden hidden within a natural hollow. At the center of this sanctuary stood a stone pedestal, intricately carved to resemble the branching pattern of a tree. Atop it rested a wide, shallow silver basin. Galadriel moved with deliberate grace toward a small waterfall that trickled into a clear pool nearby. She bent to fill a slender silver pitcher with the crystal water, then turned to face Frodo as he reached the bottom step. "Will you gaze into my mirror?" she asked, her voice carrying both invitation and warning. Frodo regarded the basin with uncertainty, his natural caution warring with curiosity. "What might I see within it?" he questioned, keeping a careful distance. Galadriel approached the pedestal and began to pour water from the pitcher into the basin. As the liquid met the silver surface, a subtle glow emanated from within its depths. "Not even the wisest can predict what the mirror will reveal," she responded, her voice melodic yet solemn. "It shows many visions, echoes of what once was, reflections of what currently unfolds, and glimpses of what may yet come to pass." She stepped back, inviting Frodo forward with a slight inclination of her head. This opening passage from the novelization works well as prose because it can dwell in the sensory and interior spaces that the film could only suggest. The descriptions, quote, "dew-dampened grass, a moonlight-woven gown, hair gleaming even in darkness," end quotes, create a slow, deliberate rhythm that mirrors the dreamlike quality of the scene. Prose can afford to linger on textures and atmospheres, letting the reader imagine the coolness of the air, the quiet weight of the night, and the tension between curiosity and caution in Frodo's mind. The internal response, quote, "his natural caution warring with curiosity," end quote, is something prose can state plainly without breaking immersion, whereas the film had to rely on Elijah Wood's acting, camera work, and pacing to convey the same inner conflict. But here, the written medium can weave external imagery with internal motivation in a way that feels seamless. However, the passage's strengths as prose also carry potential weaknesses. The lush description risks becoming overextended, which can slow narrative momentum for readers who prefer more direct storytelling. Where the film conveyed Galadriel's movement through framing and light in a few seconds, the written form requires a paragraph of description to achieve a similar mood. That can be a strength for those seeking immersion, but it also risks diluting the tension if the pacing feels too indulgent. Let's continue. After a moment's hesitation, Frodo approached the mirror cautiously, conscious of the ancient power surrounding him. The pedestal itself seemed alive, its base intertwined with the gnarled roots of the surrounding trees, as if it had grown naturally from the forest floor, rather than being crafted by hand. Frodo climbed onto the base and peered down into the dark water. At first, he saw only his own reflection staring back, a face transformed by weeks of hardship and burden. Then the water began to ripple of its own accord, though no wind disturbed the garden. Images formed within the depths, fleeting at first, then growing clearer. Suddenly, Frodo's heart leapt as a familiar figure appeared, an elderly man in white robes walking a long road. "Gandalf!" Frodo gasped, joy and disbelief flooding through him. He reached instinctively toward the water's surface, as if he might pull his friend from whatever realm contained him. But before his fingers could touch the mirror, the image shifted. Now he saw his companions, Legolas turning to look over his shoulder, the hobbits gathering close. Their expressions were accusatory, Sam turning away, as if unable to bear the sight of him. Frodo's brow furrowed in confusion and dismay. The vision blurred again, and his beloved Shire appeared. For one heartbeat, it was as he remembered. Green hills, round doors, smoke curling from familiar chimneys. Then horror descended like a shroud. Flames engulfed Hobbiton, consuming thatch roofs and wooden beams. Dark figures moved through the chaos, orcs with weapons raised, cutting down any who fled before them. Frodo watched in mute terror as Bag End, his cherished home, burned. The party tree, beneath which generations of hobbits had celebrated and danced, fell beneath savage axes. Across the once peaceful landscape, destruction reigned. Where gardens had flourished, only ash remained. Where laughter had echoed, only screams pierced the air. The mirror's glow illuminated Frodo's face, now frozen in shock. Galadriel stood motionless, her eyes closed, as if sharing his vision of devastation. More horrors unfolded. Hobbits chained together, trudging through the ruins of their homeland. Among them walked Sam, his loyal face twisted in pain, as a whip cracked across his shoulders. The green fields had become a wasteland of mud and smoke. Factories belched foul air where orchards once bloomed. The vision grew, seeming to expand beyond the confines of the basin, until Frodo felt himself drowning in its nightmarish reality. Then darkness fell across the mirror, and from its depths, the Eye emerged, its gaze fixing upon him with malevolent hunger. The chain around Frodo's neck suddenly felt heavier. The ring had slipped free of his shirt, and now dangled above the water, drawn toward the fiery eye like a moth to flame. This passage plays to prose's unique ability to inhabit a character's point of view in a way that's both literal and symbolic, letting the reader experience visions not just as external images, but as emotional events unfolding inside Frodo's mind. The shifting scenes in the mirror are layered in a way that's arguably easier to follow in writing than it was in the film, where the transitions risked feeling abrupt or perhaps overly reliant on visual effects. But here, the text can guide the reader through each transformation of the vision, allowing space for Frodo's changing reactions without breaking the flow. The detailed imagery of Hobbiton's destruction gains extra weight in prose because it's filtered through Frodo's memories. which the narration can directly recall and contrast with what he sees now. This makes the loss feel more personal than a purely visual spectacle. At the same time, the prose has moments where its richness risks overextension, while the specificity of, quote, factories belched foul air where orchards once bloomed, or the party tree fell beneath savage axes, end quotes, creates a strong sense of violation. The layering of horrors could potentially overwhelm the reader to the point where each individual image has less impact. The film solved this by using quick, impressionistic flashes to avoid visual fatigue. But prose, however, asks the reader to linger on each stage, which can blur the peaks of emotional intensity. Let's continue. Terror gripped Frodo as he felt the ring's pull toward the mirror, both physical and spiritual. With a cry of alarm, he clutched the ring and stumbled backward, falling onto the garden floor. The light faded from the mirror, leaving only ordinary water in the basin. Smoke rose from its surface as Frodo gasped for breath, the echo of what he had witnessed still burning in his mind. Galadriel regarded him with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of kingdoms. "I know what visions troubled you," she said softly, "for they dwell also within my thoughts. You have glimpsed a possible future, Frodo, the world that shall come to be should your quest falter." Frodo realized he was clutching the ring so tightly that its edges bit into his palm. He looked up at Galadriel, suddenly understanding the weight of her words. "The Fellowship begins to fracture," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper, yet clear as crystal. "The process has already begun. Soon, one among them will attempt to claim the ring. You know of whom I speak." Her gaze pierced him. "One by one, it will consume them all." Though his lips remained still, Frodo's thoughts formed words that seemed to bridge the space between them. "If you asked it of me, I would give you the One Ring." Galadriel approached slowly, her eyes fixed on his outstretched palm, where the golden band now lay exposed. "You offer it freely," she murmured, an undercurrent of wonder in her voice. "I cannot pretend my heart has not longed for this moment." Her hand extended toward the ring, trembling slightly as it hovered above Frodo's palm. His gaze shifted between her slender fingers and her face, where an internal struggle played out in minute changes of expression. Suddenly, a transformation overcame her. She seemed to grow taller, more terrible in her beauty. Shadows gathered around her form, while her hair and garments billowed in a wind that touched nothing else in the garden. "In place of the Dark Lord," she intoned, her voice resonating with power that made the very air vibrate, "you would have a queen, not shrouded in darkness, but blinding in radiance and beauty, treacherous as the deepest sea, more immovable than the earth's foundation." Her eyes darkened until they reflected no light. "All would bow down in love and despair." Frodo retreated a step, witnessing a glimpse of what might be If the ring's corruption touched even one as wise and ancient as Galadriel, light seemed to emanate from her in pulsing waves, her form wavering between the familiar and something vast beyond mortal comprehension. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the terrible vision subsided. Galadriel stood before him once more, slender, beautiful, but no longer frightening. A soft laugh escaped her lips, though her eyes remained solemn. "I have passed the test," she said, her voice returning to its melodic calm. "I shall diminish now, and journey westward across the sea. I will remain simply Galadriel." Frodo felt his courage draining away like water through cupped hands. The enormity of what lay before him seemed impossible to bear. "I cannot accomplish this alone," he confessed, his voice small in the night. Compassion softened Galadriel's features as she regarded him. "You are the ring-bearer, Frodo. To carry such a burden is to walk a solitary path. This task was appointed to you, and if you cannot find the way forward, none shall." The truth of her words settled over him. In that moment, clarity came to Frodo. Not comfort, but understanding. "Then I know what must be done," he acknowledged, staring down at the ring in his palm. "It's only I am afraid to do it." Galadriel knelt before him, bringing her ageless eyes level with his. In them, Frodo saw not pity, but profound respect. "Remember this," she said gently. "Even the smallest being may alter the course of the future." Frodo's fingers closed around the ring, his burden, his destiny. And in the quiet garden beneath the ancient trees, he accepted the solitary path that stretched before him into shadow. This final passage benefits from the written medium's ability to shift gears quickly, from grandeur to intimacy, without feeling abrupt. The transition from Galadriel's overwhelming, almost cosmic form to her familiar, human-scaled presence is conveyed not through special effects or a sudden cut, but through a single sentence that softens the atmosphere. Quote, "A soft laugh escaped her lips, though her eyes remained solemn." End quote. Prose can make that pivot feel immediate, yet natural, because the change happens inside the reader's mind, rather than in a visual frame that might need to signal it more overtly. The passage also thrives on interiority. Frodo's emotional trajectory, from awe and fear to vulnerability and reluctant resolve, is something prose can explore with direct statements, without breaking immersion. The film had to rely on Elijah Wood's performance and subtext to suggest the same emotional shift, which risked either being too understated or too heavy-handed. But here, the text balances the external exchange with internal commentary, giving the reader both the visible actions and the invisible thought process. That said, the prose does lean into familiar Tolkien-esque rhythms and motifs. The solitary burden, the small changing the great, which, while thematically faithful, are well trodden enough to feel expected. In the film, the familiarity with these tropes were offset by the visual freshness and the actor's delivery. But on the page, the responsibility falls entirely to phrasing and imagery, which here stays faithful to the original novel, but isn't especially surprising. Still, this chapter's strength lies in how it closes the encounter, not with spectacle, but with a quiet acceptance of hardship. The written form can linger in that silence, in Frodo's tightening fingers around the ring, and in the unspoken acknowledgement between two characters who understand the cost of the road ahead. Where the film transitioned to the next location, the prose can leave the reader in that still garden, feeling the weight of both what has passed and what is yet to come. Thank you for watching this comparative analysis. Next time, we'll be comparing the scene where the Fellowship leave Lothlorien with the corresponding chapter in the novelization and analyzing the differences. Take care, and if you're listening to this, please send help.